Who am I when no one needs me anymore? What has living alone taught me? Have you ever noticed that one of the hardest questions in old age has nothing to do with money, health, or even aging itself? It's a much quieter question. It usually surfaces when the house is quiet, when the phone hasn't rung in a while, when there are no appointments and no one is asking you to solve their problems. Then this question whispers softly, who am I when no one needs me today? I never thought I'd spend so much time pondering this question. For most of my life, I barely had time to think about it. Responsibilities waited around every corner. A bill needed to be paid. A family member needed support. Another task seemed too important to postpone. Looking back as an old man, I realized that for decades, I measured my own worth by how useful I was to others. Then, one day, my life became much quieter, and I had to learn a lesson no one had ever taught me. When I first started living alone, I thought the practical things would be the biggest challenge. I believed it would be hard to cook for just one person, keep the house in order, remember appointments, or solve small household problems on my own. Of course, I had to get used to all of that. But it was never the hardest part. The hardest part was entering a quiet house every evening, knowing no other voice was waiting for me. A quiet home has a special way of making you get to know yourself. At first, I tried to escape this feeling. I left the radio on. Sometimes I turned on the TV even though I wasn't interested in what was on. I wasn't looking for entertainment, I was looking for company. Every little sound seemed better than complete silence. But over the months, something unexpected happened. I no longer reached for the remote every time it got quiet. I sat in the mornings with my coffee and listened to the birds outside the window, birds I'd barely noticed for years. I heard the wind rustling through the trees. I could even hear my own breath. At first it felt strange, almost uncomfortable, because silence has the power to bring old memories to the surface. It reminds us of conversations we wish had lasted longer. It reminds us of people whose laughter once filled the rooms of our homes. But if you stay in that silence instead of running from it, something begins to change. Slowly, it no longer feels empty. It begins to feel peaceful. I think too few people talk about this. We spend most of our lives surrounded by noise. Even after retiring, we often try to keep ourselves constantly distracted because it feels unfamiliar to be alone with our own thoughts. But I've found that some of the deepest healing happens when nothing is competing for our attention. A quiet afternoon can become a loyal friend if we allow it. Instead of fearing the empty hours, I began to welcome them. I sat on my porch with no music, no TV, and no rush, just watching the day unfold. There's a lot of wisdom hidden in life's ordinary moments, but you only recognize it when you stop rushing past them. Living alone also forced me to pay attention to someone I'd neglected for many years, myself. Saying that out loud might sound selfish, but I don't think it is. There's a difference between selfishness and self-respect. For decades, I was busy taking care of everyone else. If someone needed help, I was there. If someone had a problem, I tried to solve it. I believe that's what a good husband, father, friend, and neighbor should do. There's honor in living that way. I'll never regret loving and supporting the people who mattered to me. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to ask myself a simple question. How are you, really? This question sounds so ordinary, and yet I almost never asked it of myself. Today, I ask it every morning, not because I expect a perfect answer, but because I've learned that my own well-being deserves attention. Some mornings, I wake up full of energy. Other mornings, my joints remind me very clearly how many birthdays I've celebrated. Instead of criticizing myself for slowing down, I've learned to listen to myself. When my body asks for rest, I rest. When my mind feels overwhelmed, I go outside for a slow walk instead of forcing myself to stay busy. I've realized that aging isn't just about accepting physical changes, it's also about being kinder to myself. One particular habit changed my days more than I ever expected. I stopped treating meals like a chore to get through as quickly as possible. In the past, dinner was often squeezed in between my many obligations. Today, I prepare simple meals with calm and patience. Nothing fancy, maybe a bowl of soup, fresh vegetables, a piece of fish, and perhaps some fruit for dessert. The food itself isn't the most important part. What matters is the message I send to myself. I am worth taking care of. No one has to remind me today. No one has to tell me to eat healthily or slow down. That responsibility is now mine, and strangely, I've learned to appreciate it. I also began paying more attention to the small habits that shape an ordinary day. Young people often believe that life changes through big, dramatic decisions, but an old man knows better. Most lives are built through one ordinary morning after another, waking up without haste, opening the curtains, making the bed, watering some plants, reading a chapter in a good book, calling an old friend, or taking a short walk before breakfast. None of these actions seem particularly significant on their own, but together they create stability. They remind us that life still has a rhythm, even after retirement, after a loss, or after the children have grown up and started their own lives. One realization surprised me more than any other. No one was coming to save me from an unhealthy routine. If I sat in the same armchair every afternoon feeling sorry for myself, the next day would probably look the same. But if I got up today and took one small positive step, tomorrow could already look a little different. This realization was both frightening and liberating. It meant that I myself was responsible for the direction of my remaining years. At my age, I can't control everything. I can't control time. I can't control other people. I can't even control how my body will feel every morning. But I can still choose my inner attitude. I can still decide whether to spend this day with gratitude or regret. That choice is still mine, and perhaps that's one of the greatest freedoms aging offers. Over the years, I've learned something else about living alone that I wish I'd understood much earlier. Being alone and feeling lonely are not the same thing. For many years, I believed these two things were inseparably linked. I thought loneliness would automatically follow if a person lived alone. But life teaches us through experience. Today, I know that both states can exist independently. In my younger years, there were times when I was surrounded by people and yet felt completely alone. I could sit at a family gathering, chat, and laugh with others, while a quiet emptiness inside me went unnoticed. Maybe you've experienced something similar. Sometimes, loneliness doesn't come from having too few people around us. Sometimes it comes from feeling misunderstood, from going through difficult changes, from lacking a sense of purpose, or from carrying emotions we never share with anyone. But I've also experienced moments when I was completely alone and yet deeply content. I'd sit outside in the early morning with a cup of coffee and feel more peace than in a crowded room. I'd take walks where I noticed the beauty of simple things, the sunlight through the trees, the chirping of birds, the changing of the seasons. I cooked my own meals, cleaned my home, and spent quiet evenings with a book. These moments didn't feel empty, they were fulfilling in a different way. I hope every older person eventually understands this. Your life doesn't lose its meaning just because your house becomes quieter. Your worth doesn't disappear just because your children have started their own families. Your career has ended, or you're no longer needed in the same way as before. In our younger years, we spend a lot of time being needed by others, and that's a beautiful thing. But at some point, we must recognize that our worth was never solely dependent on what we gave to or did for others. For many years, I defined myself by my responsibilities. I was a worker, a husband, a father, someone others could rely on. These roles shaped me, and I'm grateful for each one. They gave my life meaning and blessed me with wonderful memories I'll always carry. But when some of these roles shrank or disappeared entirely, I had to realize something important. I was still there. The person beneath all those responsibilities was still alive. I still had thoughts, dreams, interests, and curiosity. There were still things I wanted to experience. New mornings were still waiting for me. I could still be kind to others. I still had a reason to wake up every day. This realization held immense power. Many people reach a certain age and quietly start to believe their best years are behind them. They think growth and development belong only to the young. But I've learned that personal growth has no expiration date. A person can discover new sides of themselves at 70 or even 90. Maybe you won't become a completely different person, but you can become a deeper, wiser, and more peaceful version of yourself. I've met older people who were more curious about life than many young people. They learned new skills, traveled to places they'd always wanted to see, began painting, writing, gardening, exercising, or simply building better daily habits. They understood something important. The meaning of life isn't just about doing things for other people. It's also about experiencing the gift of your own life. Living alone taught me to be a good friend to myself. That might sound strange, but think about how we treat the people we care about. We encourage them when they're struggling. We forgive them when they make mistakes. We remind them that they're valuable. Yet many of us speak to ourselves in ways we'd never speak to another person. We tell ourselves we're too old to start something new. We claim it's too late to change. We focus only on what we've lost instead of appreciating what we still have. But aging doesn't take away every possibility, it simply changes the kind of possibilities we should seek. Maybe you can't run as fast as you used to. Maybe you can't work the same long hours. Maybe your body needs more patience and care today. But you can still love. You can still learn. You can still laugh. You can still make someone else's day a little brighter, and you can still create moments that matter. I've also learned not to wait for perfect circumstances before enjoying life. When I was younger, I often believed happiness would come after reaching the next goal, after earning more money, finishing a project, or solving the next problem. But life keeps moving, and there's always a new problem waiting for us. If we keep postponing our happiness until everything is perfect, we might spend our entire lives waiting. Today, I try to find joy in ordinary moments, in a good conversation, a warm meal, a beautiful sunset, a tidy room, a message from an old friend, or a quiet morning when I'm grateful just to open my eyes and experience another day. These things might seem small, but after living many decades, I can tell you that it's often these small things we remember the longest. One more thing I'd like to share. Don't be afraid to create a life that fits the person you are today. Some older people still live by expectations that belong to their younger selves. They believe they must keep doing certain things just because they've always done them that way. But every phase of life has different needs. Maybe you need more rest today. Maybe you need more time for yourself. Maybe you want fewer obligations and more peace. That's not a sign of selfishness. It's a sign that you're starting to be honest with yourself. There's great wisdom in recognizing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. When we're young, we often worry about impressing others. We want to be accepted and worry about what others think of us. But as we get older, we realize that inner peace is more valuable than others' approval. You don't have to attend every event. You don't have to explain every decision. You don't have to carry the problems of every other person on your shoulders. Your remaining years are precious. Spend them with people who bring warmth into your life. Dedicate your time to things that give your days meaning. Living alone wasn't a journey where I lost everything for me. It was a journey where I discovered what remained. It showed me that a quieter life can still be rich. A slower life can still be meaningful. A simple life can still be beautiful. If you take only one message from my story, let it be this. Never believe that your worth depends solely on how much others need you. You were valuable before you became a mother or father. You were valuable before you built a career. You were valuable before anyone depended on you, and you're still valuable today. The world around you can change. Your circumstances can change. The people in your life can change. But the person looking back at you in the mirror still deserves care, respect, and kindness. So if you find yourself in a quieter phase of life, don't just ask, "What have I lost?" Ask yourself, "What can I finally discover?" Maybe there are parts of you that have been patiently waiting all these years for your attention. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I truly appreciate you listening and sharing these moments with me. If something I've said has touched your heart or reminded you of your own life journey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Every life tells a story, and your experiences matter too. Take good care of yourself. Be patient with yourself. Keep finding small reasons to smile, and never forget that every new day is still a gift. Thank you for watching, my friend. I hope we can spend some more time together in the next video. Until then, I wish you security, inner peace, and the courage to continue growing in your own unique and beautiful way.